Morning. Happy Monday. For anybody who's in the chat there, please let me know how the volumes are, how the sound is. If you can hear the music and you can hear my voice clearly, that would be wonderful. And welcome. For anybody who is new, we're working on rebuilding Twitter, the front end. So this is day 4 of building out Twitter. And we're just basically, so here's real Twitter. Obviously with mobile, it shrinks that down. But here's kind of what tweets look like on full screen, and then here's where we're at. So we've created some tweets, we've created this show the thread, we've got all these buttons here, and we've been creating this out from scratch. So today we're going to be working on this panel, and we'll see how far we can get. So I'm going to move this over to here so we can see what we're doing, and so I'm going to have to expand this out so that it displays, because on live Twitter they actually remove this on mobile, so anything less than a certain width, it's just gone. So we'll implement mobile. That'll probably be next week, is implementing the mobile styles. So what's the easiest way to set up this screen? I think what I'm gonna do is put ours here like this, and that way I can just switch to this one if we want to take a look. And it can go here, and that way it's quick switching back and forth. Okay. And if you have any questions about what we're doing or the process or tools I'm using or anything, please feel free to let me know. Hey there, Tim. Good morning. How are you doing? Nice to see you. Very well, thanks. And me, I'm doing very well as well. Kind of settling into this new place and finding a good flow and enjoying the van setup. Being able to be out in the van and have like full Wi-Fi is so awesome. It's just really fun it's just a nice little studio too to be able to work in here. How's the sound, by the way? I'm playing with some stuff. I added a compressor and trying to get that to sound right. Does the volumes work? Are you able to hear me and the music all right? A tad loud. Okay. The music is a tad loud? Or I'm a tad loud? Or both? Let's try something here. Music. Okay, cool. Let me know if that is better. It's hard to tell now because the music's in a quiet spot, but yeah, just let me know if it... Cool. And I don't know if you were here last time when we added the stream avatars. You can see the little people. You're a Mega Man on the screen now. I can do stuff like, whoops, I didn't mean to draw all those ladders. I can do fun stuff like this. I haven't finished all the animations yet, so right now it's just like tries to figure it out. I can And if you, so these stars, if you type exclamation jump in the chat at just the right time, that's so awesome. Yeah, I love it. Hey, it's so fun. Next up is we can add items to the characters. So in the stream here, we can start to build like these little items, and then as we grow, we can add more and more stuff to it. But yeah, if you type exclamation jump in the chat right when that star, to time it just right, you can jump and collect the star. Oh, you got it anyway. You winner. I don't really know what the winning is yet, what it actually does, but it gives you points for something. I'll have to figure that out more as we go. So today we're working on building this side piece here. So I know you've been here for a couple of these. I don't know if you were here last week. This is kind of the progress that we got to. We got the center sort of built out here. So this is real Twitter, and then this is our version. And then we added some hipster ipsum in there and some lorem ipsum. And so today we're going to build out this side panel here. So starting with the search up at the top there. So to make it semantically correct, we would want to put this search inside of a form, just because that's best practice. And it allows, so if you don't put it inside of a form and you just use straight JavaScript, then the stuff like screen readers or slower browsers or like older browsers don't know that it's a form. So this way here allows it to kind of have a fallback so that it knows that this is a form. So even if modern JavaScript, if it's not working or it's not quite an issue as it was even 2 years ago, now most things have pretty good JavaScript, but for sure this allows it to be submitted as just a standard form either way. And so let's just take a look at this, what it is. So when you're hovering, and we won't worry about these drop downs yet because those will be JavaScript, and we might get into that after we're done. If it seems interesting to people, we can build those out, but for now I'm just worried about the primary UI. So the search, we can see it's kind of this grayed out. We got this little search icon, the word search Twitter, and then when we select it, it turns to this blue background, blue color, and white. So let's work on that. And this is just an input. Type equals, I think there's a type equals search, yeah. So, and we can add placeholder text. Holder search Twitter. Let's just take a look and see what that looks like. So there we go. Okay, so I think I want to add some padding to this sidebar to just give it some space. And that'll just ensure that we have enough padding on this side here. And we got a little bit at the top. So let's just do that in the aside. There's a couple ways you could do it. You could do that in the form so that each element itself has it, but I think for the purposes of this, the easiest way is to do this sidebar here. You should make Nightbot a Nightbot avatar, like a knight as in armored. Yeah, that'd be sweet actually. Nightbot is kind of like the default bot, so but it's kind of like finicky, and it has some weird like default settings and stuff, and people are suggesting have been suggesting that it's like fairly easy to build your own bot. So I'm thinking I might build my own bot, and maybe that's who will be. Maybe we'll actually just create a night bot and he'll actually be a guy in a suit of armor. That would be pretty awesome actually. We can have a whole story just for him. So we got our height and width. So I think actually all I'm going to do is just put the padding left of say 5 rem, so that's 50 pixels. And so what that gives us is just this space here, and that's a bit much. So let's try 3.5 rem. And so now this is going to be a little annoying working on not being able to see that, so I think it might be better like this. And now we've got our input here, so I think the form itself is where I'm going to add that margin. So you can see we got a little bit of a top piece there. I think I'll add that on the form. So I'm going to give this a class of search form, and then we'll go back into here and we'll say sidebar search form. We probably don't need sidebar in this case because we're just using, it's the only going to be the only one on there. And we'll just give a margin top of 1 rem, so 10 pixels. That looks pretty good. So now we can give the search form input type equals search some stylings, and so we'll make it, I think actually because, whoops. So there's a few different ways we can do this. So on here we actually have this search icon that we need to put into there, and then we've got the div, we've got the space. So one way that you can do this is to make this a container, and then your input is here with no borders or no background on it, which I think that's probably how they did it. But then it gets tricky into trying to figure out how to style this div. So we can do that with some pseudo selectors. So that's something new that we haven't worked with, is pseudo selectors. Let's give that a shot. So some of these things, like these puzzles, they're kind of like puzzles to solve. Like if I didn't want this search icon in here, it would be pretty easy to just style this with this text in here. Because actually here, let's just show that. I can just do something like width 100%, border radius it looks like maybe 3 rem, 30 pixels, background, color, and we'll use our gray. And then we have gray text, which is darker. So I'm going to try that, and then our color will be var gray text. And we'll just see how that looks. Interesting, if you can make him as a bot from the ground up, might as well too, as it goes along with the channel. A bot, how do you mean? So that could be cool, like a mech knight. He's like a robot in a armor. So like with the stream avatars, you can also add like pieces, so like he could have weapons and he can have different helmets and different colors and stuff like that. And so maybe on our Wednesday streams, when some of the work that we do on those, the pixel art stuff, we can actually create some of those avatars. It could be fun. So yeah, so this, obviously we also want, what does the border look like on here? So when it's not hovered, there actually is no border. So we will do, and so here's an interesting thing. I'm going to put border none just to illustrate a point here, and then I'm going to put some padding. We will go 1.5 on the top and 2 on the sides, and see what that looks like. So that's not bad. It's a little chunky on the top, so we'll get rid of that. I think because we're working on these like this, what I might do is stack these in that way, because we're just working with these two right now. And the font size needs to be a little bit bigger, but now we need a little bit more, so 1.2, and I think actually I'm going to go with 3 on the sides. And so what I might do is actually do, so the way that padding and margin work is it's top, right, bottom, left. So top, right, bottom, left. So you could do padding left if you wanted to explicitly say it, or you can do, this is the top. On the right, we actually only want 2 rem. On the bottom, we want the 1.2 rem, same as the top. And then on the left, so that we can actually have 5 rem. So that actually pushes this over, and that gives us space for that icon there. And then this is the focus state. So when you're focused, this is what it's currently doing. You mentioned you can program your own bot instead. Yeah, well, like, so basically the programming of the bot, what that does is creates a moderator. So right now what Nightbot does, and I've disabled most of the settings, but at first he was like, anybody who typed in caps, it would like, so you're that's so awesome, you would have actually got like banned for 5 seconds, or like knocked out of the stream for 5 seconds. So so that was kind of annoying, and you couldn't post links and a few other things. So that's what the building the bot, making the bot, you can like create a bot that like moderates things. Because one of the things that I wanted to do actually, and this is something, actually I think I did create a command for this. So if I do this, yeah, so that's a command that I wrote, that .git, and then Nightbot sends this link. So this is a link that you can access the code that we're working on, and every time I finish a session, I update it to the latest version. So this is like live. Anybody can download and make changes and edit this code and view it. And one of the things you can do with the Nightbot is like every 15 or 20 minutes you can have Nightbot automatically send this command, so that way as people are viewing, if they want, as people come in and go sort of thing, this will just be in the stream once in a while so people know that it's there. So yeah, super cool. So I'm going to just increase the font size a little bit here. Let's see if 16 pixels is good. That looks a bit big. Let's try 14. It's 15. I feel weird using 15 pixels, but that's kind of what it's at. So let's do that. And let's go with actually 4.5 rem. So these are like the minor, like fine-tuning type things that you can do to really, it's all the design aspects. But little tiny things, just like pixel art too. That's what I love about pixel art. It's like 1 pixel can make a huge difference, and it's the same with your letter placing, and the space between your letters and the space between the writing can mean a difference between being able to easily read something and struggling with it. And it's not even always obvious to the person who's reading it how subtle that is. So we have that. So let's work on, this is the focus state. So the way that we do that is we have sort of the same selector, that's what these are, and then we can do focus. And just to illustrate this, I'm just going to change the background color to red, and so that way when we select, that changes to red. So this is how we style this the way that this does here. By default there's an outline, and this is so that screen readers and things like that know that, or people with lower visibility can still notice. So it's like recommended that you leave some kind of an outline on there. For the purposes of this, I'm going to actually say outline none because I'm going to put my own outline, which is kind of what Twitter's doing here. They're highlighting it with the blue border. And now I've got border none here, and on here I'm actually going to put border, and it looks like it's like a 1 pixel solid, and we've got that blue color. And so we'll see when we select, that's how we get that there. And so how does Twitter do it? So you'll notice when I select, if I go into here, it actually expands. And Twitter doesn't. And so the reason for that is that when we have no border, there is no border, and we add a border, it actually adds 2 pixels, one on each side of the item. So the easiest way to solve that problem is actually to just give this a 1 pixel solid border that is transparent. And now you'll see that it won't pop like that. Oh, and it also, okay, so it changes the background color actually to white. So let's do that. Background color white. There we go. So a couple ways we can add that icon. We could put this whole thing in a container, like a div or something like that, and then we could put that inside of there and style it absolutely. That's one way to do it. I think I'm going to try doing this with a pseudo selector, and what pseudo selectors are is basically you can, for every selector you can have before or an after, and what that does is allows you to insert something before or after the element that you're selecting. So, which is kind of what we want. We want to be able to put this in here. But I'll need the code to get the font awesome. Cool, man. See you soon. I'll need the code for the font awesome icon. But for now, I think I'm just going to put the, so you can do content. So content is what content you want. You have to have a content. If you don't put content in there, it won't actually show up. So I'm just going to put the letter O in there for now so we can see how that looks. And let's give it a position. So the input, yeah, so I think that this actually isn't going to work the way that I would like. I think we will have to actually wrap this, or I might be able to put it on the form. Let's do it on the form itself. So let's try that. Before the form, position. So in order to position this absolute within here by the relative positioning of this, we have to give the containing form a position of relative. Position relative. So, and I can illustrate that. So if I now give this position absolute, I can say top 0, left 0. And now we see we've got this O here. But if I didn't have this position relative on the parent, now it basically, what position absolute does is absolutely positions it to the next relatively positioned parent. So this sidebar, the aside, is position relative. So same thing, if I was to get rid of this, now you'll see the O is up here because the next relatively positioned parent is the body, which is the main div container. So if we put that in there, position relative, and now we can put position absolute down here, and now we're actually styling based on this. So what that allows us to do is actually, let's move it down 1 and let's move it over 3. No, let's go 2. That looks good. So now, though, we need to find Font Awesome. So, the Font Awesome icon. So by default, when you use Font Awesome, you can do like we're doing out here with icons, where we use a class of whatever the icon is within Font Awesome. Or you can do it within the font here, within the style sheets, but it's a different process for displaying it. So I'm going to go through and find the character code for a search icon. So let's look up search for search. So we got this. So here's the search. Getting coffee, 1 sec. I haven't been drinking coffee for like a week now, and I still cheat and go and actually go get a coffee every once in a while, but it's one of those things that like I keep trying. It's like, I need to stop drinking coffee, and I don't really want to stop drinking coffee, but I do see the benefits of drinking less coffee, but I don't really want to give it up completely. It's just too delicious. That's cool. Okay, so it's the specific Font Awesome 6. So this is the key, is trying to figure out what font I actually have to reference here. Let's try this and see if that works. No. So let's try Font Awesome 6 free. Font Awesome 6. Somewhere in here it's got to show us how to actually set up that font, because with the JavaScript version it doesn't seem to automatically do that. So let me see what Google says. Font Awesome 6 pseudo comments. Font Awesome 6 font family. Let's see what that shows. Spending more time on this than I would like, so I might actually give this one more shot here and then just move on to a different option. So start for free. Download Font Awesome yourself. I wonder if this will let me get the font family. So yeah, so this is a good, this is a good learning thing, is how to use these, because these are Font Awesome free for the web. So I'm using two different ways. I'm I'm using the JavaScript to display it with these here, but I'm needing to use CSS and the font family in order to do it in CSS. So we're going to open this up and see if the font family is in there, and if the font family is in there, then I'll set that up. But while that's going on, while it's figuring out how to download that, let's move on. Let's go back, let's close this, let's go over to here, and we'll start to work on this next section here. So it's a gray box with the line underneath and then hovers in there. And then we've got a place for images or one of these icons. So it's similar to the tweet, but a little bit different. So let's put in the HTML for that. So below the form, we're going to have, I'm going to give this a class of what's happening. And then here we'll give the first thing, we'll give this an h4 of what's happening. And then we'll have one of our, I'll just call it a happening. And so I see two options. There's going to be a piece on this side and an icon, or a piece on this side and an image. And so this, I would say, would be a really good candidate for a Flexbox. We'll put a left and a right. We'll give this one a width, and then this one here will either be the image or it'll be this icon. So to do that, so let's do two examples of it. In here, first we'll give the meta, which is basically US news. I don't know how to put that dot in there. Let's go like that, 2 hours ago. And then we have our text. And here I'm just going to do a lorem, and it's short, so let's just give that much. And then this will need to be wrapped in a class so that it has a container to put those two together. So we'll just call this, I'm going to call it a happening left. And we'll have a happening right. And then we'll move this stuff into the left, and then in the right, we'll use, let's put some pictures of kittens in there. Place kitten. So we grab this, and we will put in image kitten. So there. So now we see this text starting to come up over here. And now we can start to style that. So this here, that's our happening right, is one, this is a div, that's the end of the happening div. So this here is one of our happenings, and then this one will be the second one. And in this one, instead of a image, we will have the same thing that's in our tweet, which is this here. And so when we take a look over here, we can see that that's there. Obviously it needs to be styled and that, but yeah, okay. So let's style our what's happening first. What's happening? It looks like there's a bit of a margin above, so I'm gonna put that into here. Actually, I'm gonna put that in the form. So the form, we had a margin top, and we'll have a margin bottom of 2 rem actually, because it's bigger than. It looks a bit too big. 1.5. 0.5. Then our what's happening, it doesn't really need to be, the what's happening itself doesn't need a whole lot, but we'll get this heading. So the H4, let's actually just do H4, and we'll give it a background color of the gray. Did you get up to anything cool this weekend, Tim? And that looks like 1 rem on the top and bottom and 1.2 on the left and right, something like that. And obviously the font size needs to be a bit bigger, so let's go, yeah, that looks pretty good. Let's give the weight of 600, 700, 800, sure, that looks good. And then we have our border top left radius, and we'll try 3 rem, and let's just see what that looks like. That's way too much. 1.5 rem. That looks pretty good. And then we'll do the same thing on the border right radius. Perfect. And so then we do have a border on the bottom. And so I think what I'm going to do is on each of these, I'll just put a border bottom on them. So I'll start with this one. Border bottom, 1 pixel solid gray text. And what is actually gray hover? What's happening is input, so this. So let's style these and see how that works. So we've got a happening. So happening, our background color is the gray. And so the hover color is actually the same as the gray, I think. Or lighter. Oh, I see. So there's this, and then there's the dark hover. So this actually needs to be text, I think. Same color as the text. It looks a little dark, but we'll see if we need to add another color. And I can grab this because it will have the border bottom on the happening. And I'm going to make this display flex line items center justify content space between. So let's make the images the right size. So we called that, we'll do a happening right image. So happening right image, we'll say max, what do they do? So they've actually got a specific size for it. So I think I'll do that too. But in order to do that, I need to give it a container. So I'm going to give this a class of happening image. We'll move that up there, and then I think I'll do the same in here where I'll give this a class of happening more. And we'll move that up as well. Good question. I finished a book Tanner Grayburn gave me. Cool. I saw him like a week ago, actually, or a couple weeks ago. He's back on Salt Spring. The book is called This by Shri HWL Punja. I've been getting better at Fortnite on my Switch Lite. Cool. And making sure I keep being more active. Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I've been trying to do at least an hour of walking a day. That's one of the reasons that I really wanted to leave office work was that it didn't make sense to me to be sitting in the same spot. Like, even though we had an hour lunch break, I find I work better if I'm going to be doing coding, because I'm coding all day long most of the time. A lot of the time, or working on projects, either coding or writing or creating art or doing all these things sitting, that I actually find like 2 to 3 hours is really good to sit, and then I move my body, go for a walk for like a half an hour, 45 minutes, and then come back and then do another 2 to 3 hours. And I can sustain way more and get way more done than trying to sit in one specific spot for 8 hours in an office. Just did my cardio at 7 a.m., 3 different staircases and walking uptown. Sweet. And which town did you say you're at again? Are you still in like Kimberly area? Good for you, man. Glad you noticed. Yeah. That's one of the key teachings of yoga, I guess, is to pay attention to yourself and learn. You've got this body, you may as well figure out how it works. Kimberly, yeah, so it's all uphill, yeah. It's a cool little town, I like it there. Are things starting to open up there at all? Places opening? So we actually have that happening image, and we'll style it first, and we'll just give it a width of, say, 5 rem and a height of 5 rem, and a background. And so what I'm going to do is then I can style the image within there, and I can give it a width of 100% and a height of 100%, and then this new tag, which is object fit, contain. And I think, yeah, so that's pretty good. And we'll need to adjust the size there. Let's do cover instead of contain, and that way it will fill that 5x5 space, which seems to be what they're doing here. Hey there, Don. Nice to see you. How are you doing? I sat in a cafe for the first time. Such a luxury now. Yeah, no kidding. I've been like, in some ways, there's a little cafe. There's like, the cafes have been open here, but just for takeout. And there's like a couple food cart places, which has been great to be able to go to. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to sitting inside at a cafe again. Although it's really been really good for me to change my habits, because I got into the habit of just going to cafes, and I love going and sitting at cafes, but it became it was almost like I needed to go sit at a cafe to work, and so this here has kind of forced me to break through that pattern. So I'm looking forward to trying to maintain a healthy balance with the amount of time that I go and work in cafes, because it ends up costing money and I end up eating more than I need to. So it's been really good in that way. And also cafes are awesome. Still tired this morning, but doing all right. Cool. Parties and festivals are going to be nuts when this is all over. Yeah, no kidding. I saw a video the other day of like this like festival going on where it was really cool to see. They had gridded out the dance floor with rope so that you could stay in your like quadrant that was like 6 feet of space sort of thing, and you could party. It's like, that's actually seems like a really cool way to be able to dance, have space. Although there's also something sweet about just being with a group of people all dancing and bumping into each other. And did you have a good weekend there, Don? Keep to your bubbles, yeah. So just for Dawn or anyone else who's coming in, we're rebuilding Twitter here, so that's kind of what we've been working on. We built, and I just noticed that there's an error there, so we haven't really checked vertical problems yet. But here's what we've built over this is the day 4. So, and right now we're just working on this piece over here. And so when we do a side-by-side, this here is real Twitter, and then you can see the one that we built. So we've done all the code live, and the intention is eventually I'm going to build a tutorial on how it was done, so be able to see the full process in a more refined way. But this is where we're at now, is building out the search functionality, or not search, the what's happening part. We added the search, and so now we're just building these pieces in here. And all we're doing is just using straight index, or just straight HTML and CSS. So literally you could create this with Notepad if you wanted to. Everything that we've written can be done literally in Notepad and opened up on any Windows computer, any computer. And then here's the link in the chat there for the code. So if you're interested in looking further at the code, feel free to download it. You can clone it. If you're familiar with Git, you can view it. You can use it for whatever you want. Yeah, it was good. Good time to be camping. Yeah, nice. Had a good stream on Sunday. Sweet. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to, I don't know if I've had a chance to get in on your stream yet, but I will certainly do that. That'll be awesome. What do you do on your stream? Five points for Don. Still don't know what the points are for, but C game engine. Right, yeah, cool, that's right. You were building the game engine. Grandmas with guns. Awesome. Do you have a set schedule for your stream? So obviously we need a little bit of padding, so I think I'll put some padding around the whole thing, which is our happening here. So let's just give that a padding of one rem. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, I think that's good. And then we want to, I think the best way to handle this would be to put a margin on this happening image. So I'm going to do a margin. Maybe not the best way, but this is one way to do it. Because I could either put this margin on here, so if we are to look at what's going on here, we can use the inspector and we can see, so I've added a margin on the left of this. So we've got our happening right, and it's got a margin left on it, which, sorry, it's this here, the happening image. So that's another thing. We could put a margin left on the happening right if we wanted to, which would do it, but because we've got different things than just images in here, it might not always want to have that margin. So we know that this margin image, when we have an image in there, we need a certain bit of space in there, so that's where I've used that, and you can see that in the inspection tools with here by the like yellow color on the side of the sort of taupey, I don't even know what color that is. Pink? Is it pink? I don't know. The not blue highlighted color on the left, that's your margin. And so I could have put the I could also put it on here, so rather than put it on here, I could put some on here, and that would actually make sense as well, so that there's always space. Maybe I will do that instead. I think that's actually a better way to do it. So instead of the margin left here, in my happening left, which we haven't styled yet, happening left. And anybody who's a web dev, if you have any thoughts on this, please feel free to share your thoughts on it. That's one of the things that's nice about web development, is that there's millions of ways to do everything. So I'm going to give a padding of right. So I like to use padding. So 4:15 to 6 a.m. Central Time, bright and early when most Americans are sleeping. Yeah, that's even earlier for me, so Central Time. So that would be like 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. for me. So I'm sometimes up at that time, but we will see. I will, if I'm ever up and not sleeping on... Is it every day that you do that, Don, or most days? Hey there, Feet First. Welcome. Nice to see you. How are you doing? Let's see if I have candy for you in my purse. Lead guns, gunfire. Yes, exactly. Monday to Friday. Cool. You're good? Cool. That's nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm really good too. Just plugging away at the Twitter thing here. And I think this might be new since, I don't know if you were here, Feet First, since I've added the little stream avatars and updated my what's it called, my overlay with the brick pattern there, and just added some cool stuff. Still a work in progress, but it's been fun to do that. And I just noticed that I don't think my follower goal is updating. So that's interesting. I'll have to take a look at that, because I think we're up to 22 followers now. So I'll have to take a look at that. Did you have a good weekend there, Feet First? So Don, Monday to Friday, how long have you been keeping up with that schedule? Do you find streaming it as like a productive motivator for doing that work? Yep, how was yours? Mine was good. Yeah, that's awesome that yours was good too. What did I do this weekend? On Friday night, so Cup of Joe, I don't know if any of you are familiar with him. He's a pixel artist here on Twitch. his sort of community. We all watched. Yeah, you didn't know him first. Cool. Yeah, we watched Ponyo over on the Discord channel together. So that was kind of a cool experience to watch a movie with a chat. It was super fun. We're all just kind of like making fun of it and having fun and saying jokes. So it's kind of a cool way to be able to watch a movie and be able to chat, but not disturb the people who don't want to be chatting because you're typing. So yeah, it was super fun. That was a really cool way to start the weekend. And then Sunday, so I live with my wife and our friend Johanna right now, and we had a picnic down in the garden, or just on the grass. We got up and made banana pancakes and hash browns and some tomatoes and sprouts, and yeah, it was super awesome. And there was in the yard that we're at, there's a mother deer and her baby that keep wandering by, so that's like super cute as well. And we've got bunnies that live in the yard. It's like being in a Disney movie. Yeah, it's super sweet. So yeah, so I'm putting the padding, this is the padding for all the way around there, and then on the happening left, I'm actually going to put a padding right of 1 rem. And so now, instead of having that margin on this side, I've actually got the padding on this side. And the reason that I try to use padding for spacing, there's different purposes. So padding, margins have what's called collapsing borders. So if you put 2 items, one on top of each other, and they each have margins, the margins that connect with each other will actually collapse. So if I've got, and this is for paragraphs, this is kind of the main for text and things like that. So like if I've got 2 paragraphs in a row, if I want my spacing to be, say, 10 pixels above and 10 pixels below, but if I have 2 paragraphs together, I don't want 20 pixels between them. So be right back. Cool. Feed first. See you soon. So the margins will collapse and give you just the 10 pixels, whereas padding will hold that and actually give you the 20 pixels. So for spacing things like that you want to always be accurate, padding is good. For text layout types of things, even headings and that, usually top to bottom, margin tends to be better. So I think I need to increase the font size a little bit on this overall, and we'll say 1.6 rem and see how that looks. A little big. 1.4. And actually, because, so I just noticed we've also got this under stuff here, so there's some information underneath, so I'm going to add that in as well. So we've got our text, which is here, and then we've got our it's a couple of different things. Up here it's this, it's also got the number of tweets when it's a, so I'm just going to give this sub meta, and then we'll just get some dummy data in there. Tweets. Some of them have them, some of them don't, so we'll just leave it at that. And so instead of giving a blanket font size to this, since we have to kind of style everything anyway, I'm actually going to do it individually. So our happening dot meta, is that what I did? Happening meta, yeah. This font size will be 1.2, and the color is going to be the gray. And that's not gray text. And so that's a bit too light, I think. And I still don't like this border, so let's add another gray color. So one of the things that we'll probably do after we get it all built is actually go through the code and refactor things. So we'll move things around into their own files and folders, and I'll show some techniques that we can use to improve. It's really good to learn the basics. This is how you write it out, and then we can do things like Sass, which is a preprocessor that makes writing CSS even faster. We can separate the files out so that we have some structure. We can go over that. If there's anything specific, so this is my intention for this stream here, is to teach HTML, CSS, front-end development, to provide a good grasp on that, to be able to then go into the more advanced topics of JavaScript, and then from there hopefully into even React or some back-end development, databases and API building. So if there's any topics specifically that you find interesting, please feel free to drop them in the chat, or connect with me on Twitter or Facebook. So I'm going to grow a gray medium, and a lot of times like naming things can be really challenging to like know how to name things. Like I've got gray and then gray S, which for me is gray subtle, but then this one I'm going to do gray medium, so maybe I'll actually change this to gray M. But in general, it's probably a better practice to name it gray medium, because if another developer comes in and has to work on this, gray S might not mean anything to them. So it's often better to be a little bit more verbose with your naming conventions, especially with modern dev tools that typically will pre-process and shrink things down anyway. So the more clear you can be, the better, with understanding too that you don't want to write a book to label something. But that's a part of the refactoring, is going through and just cleaning that stuff up as well. So I think what I'll start with, so there's the gray text, which I think is just a little bit too dark. What am I using in here right now? What's happening? Gray text, and it's actually not quite dark enough. Welcome back, feet first. So yeah, obviously the grays are starting to get a little bit unwieldy, so I may need to kind of do a pass of the grays and organize them a bit, but I might do that off stream sometime or during the refactoring. So we got a gray text. It's a little too light, actually. And then we've got, and actually I think the backgrounds are a little bit, so this color here is actually closer to the overlay. So that's something that I might do, is let's do that first. Let's lighten up let's make this gray S in the background color, gray S, and see how that looks. So that's interesting. The gray S looks darker, but up here, it is actually darker. So this looks a lot gray, gray, gray S. I think it might be the monitor, maybe. Let's take a look. No, it's definitely lighter. Let's take a look up at the top. So if I adjust this, I wonder where we're using the gray subtle, because I kind of want to lighten this up. Let's do that and see what that looks like. So that color looks better, and I think we're okay. Nothing else seems to be too blown out. So yeah, that definitely looks better. And now this border, and this border actually looks better. So maybe we don't... Yeah, because now that the background's lighter, the text actually looks a little bit better. But I think I might just darken this just slightly more. Even slightly more. I think that's good. They have Asprite for Linux. Yeah, that's cool. Are you running a Linux box yourself, Tim? Asprite's also, it's not open source, but it's, I mean, it kind of is. It's up on Git, so it's the source code is available to compile yourself. So if you know how to compile code, you can get a copy of Asprite that way. And it's only $15, and it supports the creators, so it's a pretty good deal, I would say. Hey there, Blackbirds LP. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you. Thanks for stopping by. What's the reasoning for font 62.5%? Cool. So good question. So my resets that I typically do are these here, and then I set this. So what this does is actually, so a rem unit is relative to the size of the font size of the HTML element. And so by default, that's 16 pixels. So when you do 16 pixels, if you did one rem, then that would be equivalent to 16 pixels. So by changing the font size to 62.5% at the HTML level, that makes one rem equal to 10 pixels. So 62.5% is 10 pixels of 16 pixels, if that makes sense. So it just makes figuring things out. So then when I do 2 rem, I know that that's 20 pixels. If I do 1 rem, that's 1 pixel. 3.2, I know that that's 32 pixels. And so the reason that I would want to use rems instead of maybe using pixels, because you could obviously just do 32 pixels. That's even easier than doing 3.2 rems. But what this allows me to do, which actually one of the things I was... our next thing that we're doing is doing mobile styling, but so to illustrate this, I'll bring this up. So font sizes, when you shrink down, obviously you want the font sizes to maybe be a little bit more, a little bit smaller. So what you can do is just with like a couple lines of code here, you can set up a media query. Let's do 800 pixels, and this, I don't need this. This comes out of here. And we can say HTML, and we can set the font size to 50%, let's say. And now instead of having to change all of my elements individually, is this working? Max width 800 pixels. Let me just, so that I know that this is working, let's just change the body ground color. just to make sure we've hit that break point. Oop. So it is not working. I know I'm missing something here. Let's do display none. Okay, it's just way smaller than I was thinking. So let's set this to 1200 pixels just so we can, there. So now you can see, so the body background color isn't working, but, because I've got an override in there somewhere. But as you can see, so when I get down to below 1200 pixels, all of the font and everything that I've used rems on now automatically will resize based on that font size. Does that make sense? Any difference if you put it to category as well instead of in HTML? So like if we were putting it up into here, you're saying, like if I did font size 62.5% here, is that what you're asking? Yeah. So rems are specific to the HTML element. So in theory, if you did put it up into here, that would change the HTML element, so that would work, except that then you're actually saying everything needs to be this size of font. Yeah, in theory, I think it might actually work. Let's just actually try it. It may have other consequences. Oh, so I think, yeah, okay. So it doesn't work because by default stars font size probably isn't 16 pixels. It might be like, I don't know what, it'll be different for every browser, right? So it'll be different for different things, whatever the default font is. Whereas if you put it in HTML, the default is pretty much always 16. So you'd have to do a different percentage if you did the star. You'd have to find out what the default font is and then do the percentage that calculates it based on that. I think that's what's going on there. But yeah, so it looks like it has to be in the HTML in order for it to work. Does that all read? Does that all make sense? It's a really quick way for doing media queries to just like automatically get things to work a little bit like relatively quickly. Because you can see, like, if I don't have this, what about the body instead of HTML? Yeah, no, it's the same thing. So it's specific to the HTML. Body will just change the font size for the body. So rems always look at the HTML font size. And so by doing this, I can actually, I can make adjustments here. So if I say 50%, then it'll automatically adjust all of my elements. Yeah, it's a really good question. It's a really good technique I've been using for a while that really, like I say, really helps for mobile, switching things over to mobile. So we got this looking good. I still think that gray text needs to be just a little bit darker. Gray text. It's always hard to tell too, like I'm kind of coding on a monitor or a TV, so it might actually be beneficial for me to pull it over to my monitor. Yeah, and it looks a lot clearer on my monitor than it does on this TV. It's just easier to stream with two screens. So that image needs to be a little bit bigger, so let's go back down to there. And obviously you can see, so this file is getting huge, so this is where we would actually probably want to split this up into different files, and SAS is really good for that, so that would be our next thing in the refactoring. We can take a look at that if that's something that's interesting to everybody, that you'd want to learn SAS. SAS is kind of the industry standard for, I would say, for writing HTML. It all compiles down to CSS. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Yeah, ask any more questions. That's great. SAS, girl. SAS, yes, SAS. That's it. Yeah, SAS. So it's what does it stand for? It's like, it actually is like related to SAS, like sassy CSS, syntactically awesome style sheets. And there's the logo for it. So it's a language initially designed by Hampton Catlin and developed by Natalie Weizenbaum. After its initial versions, Weizenbaum and Chris Epstein have continued to extend SAS with SASscript, a scripting language used in SAS files. And so all SAS does basically is it like I say, it compiles down to CSS, but it's a preprocessor, so you get to write in this SAS language, which what that lets you do is, so I've got this what's happening, and then inside of there I've got a happening. Really, if I'm doing this entirely correctly, it's good practice for me to do this. So that way I'm saying the happening that's in what's happening. It looks a little redundant, but then it just, when you get into huge systems that may have more than one happening, you want to be a little bit more explicit about which happening that is. This is a pretty specific example, but hopefully that makes sense, that if you have, so here's another one, like I have this meta, so I've put a happening.meta because it's a good chance I may have a meta somewhere else, or happening.text. What SAS lets you do is, instead of having to put this in front of there, I can actually put it inside of here, and then SAS knows when it precompiles to put this in the front of this, and then when it outputs, it will actually output it as this. So if that's something that's interesting to you, that's kind of the industry standard. That's where most websites are going now to be able to use SAS, because it's just way more efficient. Okay, let's get this font going here. And then we've got these arrows. So this is obviously a bit bigger, and this is the text. So let's go to the happening.text, and this we want a font size a bit bigger, maybe 1.6, and the font weight of 700. Let's try that. It's pretty close. And so here's where I was saying, Tim, earlier, that like the pixels matter. So you can see how this looks pretty close, but the wording is actually, the line height is actually closer together on these ones here. So let's move that, and I think I also want to change the text in the two of them, just because having them both exactly the same can actually make it more difficult to see. Having that contrast of them will give a better idea. And so this now has got that over there, so that's good. So it looks like, so I actually want this up at the top, and we actually want both of these up at the top. And I styled them with align center. So instead, I'm actually going to say flex, can I do top? Align items, top. There. So now, as you can see, we've got this here, and we've got this here, and it's moved up to the top. And everything's going to line up from the top baseline. So let's go back to that line height, and let's height 1 point, or let's do 2 rem. I find at least 4 pixels above what the font size tends to work. They might be a little bit closer. It also depends on the font too, so it really comes down to just changing it pixel by pixel, and that looks pretty readable. Because it's a bigger font, you can get away with them being closer together, whereas if it's a thinner font, you might want a bit more space. I do think we want a little bit of space up above, and a little bit below. So I'll put that into here because we want it above and below. So I'm going to give it a padding of just 5 pixels and 0. I think even less, 3 pixels. And it really does make a difference, just those like 3 pixels of having that space compared to before. So I don't know if it is that noticeable to you, but so you can see it looks just slightly crammed up in there, but we add those 3 pixels and it just makes it just that much easier to read. The other thing, there was something else I was going to say, but I can't remember. So I want to make that image just a little bit bigger. Oh, that was what I was going to say. So Blackbird, the rem, so even when we're doing these paddings here as well, that adjusts all the padding. So that's the other reason why when you go to mobile, otherwise you have to readjust all your paddings and stuff, and you still have to make some adjustments for specific things, but it does a huge amount of the work for you to just resize things. So I noticed that we've added the gray border for this, but we still have the gray text on the top one, and it should be the same. And then all of these have this cursor, the pointer cursor, because they're always links, and then they've got a hover class. So I'm going to make this the pointer cursor, and then we'll add a hover where the background color changes to gray text. I think will work. Nope, way too dark. Actually, the gray S, because it's the same as the border. It's a little darker, and so maybe we can actually lighten the gray subtle as we want to go. So it's kind of like we're creating a gradient. A gradient. My gray subtle, I'm going to make it just slightly more subtle. That looks a bit better. I think a tiny bit more, but that looks good. And just because it's bothering me, I'm going to organize these a little bit. Blue dark is a little bit darker. We've got our grays. It's really hard to tell which ones of these are darker. This is a bit darker than this one. And actually it's darker than this one there. Let's just do that. And this is actually the darker blue. And so oftentimes what I'll do, which I'll probably end up doing, so when we go through and do like a has won a high five. Yeah, high five. Cool. Let's Tim has won a high five. High five, Tim. Yeah, so I would probably go gray 1, gray 2, gray 3, gray 4. So when we refactor, that's probably the approach that I would take. Blue 1, blue 2. And that way I just know that, like, it starts... I can specify my color. This is kind of how Tailwind, so there's Tailwind CSS is kind of doing this approach where you just know that you've got like 7 or 8 blues, and the higher the number, the lighter it is, or the darker, whichever approach you want to take. That'd be cool if avatars high fives you back. Cool. Yeah, actually that's a cool idea. You can actually create your own custom animations for specific things and moves. So I think you just hit the nail on the head on something. I'm going to add that so that then that'll be something I'll work on for, I don't know if I'll have it for the Wednesday stream, but for next Monday, I'll set it up hopefully so that at least for the Jesse characters, my little avatar guys, not Mega Man, but the other characters, if you type exclamation high five in the chat, they'll do a high five. I think that'll be a fun project to try and work on. So we got a half hour left, and we should be able to finish most of this done. There is some icons here that'll be a little bit trickier. And then this show more here. So let's just... I think that image size looks a little bit better. I think I want it just slightly bigger still. So let's go back to here. Let's do 6.5 and 6.5. And then we want a border radius of... Let's try 2 rem, see how that looks. And so what's happening here, so I've got an image inside of this happening image, and I've put a border radius on the container, but the image itself actually goes outside of the borders, so you need to do an overflow hidden. And then now that'll give us those borders, those rounded edges like up here. That looks a bit much though, so let's back that off a bit. There. And if I refresh, we should get a different picture of a kitten, I believe. Maybe not. It must cache it. We can do this though. And I think, there we go. Still going to cache it again this time here, but we got a new picture. Let's style the tweets parts. That's the sub meta we called it. Below the text, I try to keep things organized in my style sheets based on the way that they show up in the DOM here as much as possible. It definitely doesn't happen all the time, but it is a good practice to get into, to just be able to find things. Although search and move through the documents is pretty quick nowadays. Font size 1.6, because it looks like it's the same size as the text. I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller though. And then its color is the gray text. That looks good. So then below that we have the this is a happening, this is a happening. So we've got our two happenings. Now we need nope, this is the end of the happening. This here is our container, so we actually need our bottom piece. So class equals happening footer. And so to make this actually semantically correct, I would probably want to make this a footer. And we can do the same thing up here where we can actually... I'm just going to leave this as an H4, but theoretically I would maybe want to put this H4 into a div and call it a heading. That just allows, mostly for accessibility for screen readers and things like that, it knows then what are the pieces of the document. And in here we just have a link that is show more. And we'll see how that looks. Perfect. So I just need to spell this correctly, and then we'll style the footer. How long am I streaming for today? Just for another 20 minutes till noon. And then my wife's just starting a new job today, so she's taking the van to head there, so I'll be shutting down the stream and moving indoors. Was hoping to go for a walk, but it's kind of raining, so we'll see. Sometimes raining walks are nice though. You'll stick around? Cool. Yeah, it'll just be another 20 minutes. I think we'll try to get at least this part done, and then maybe I'll do this stuff here and we can worry about this stuff next week. Dash footer. We're gonna get the same. We want the background color. And we want actually, so here's our what's happening. We've got our border top and bottom. We want to, or top left and right. We want to do the same here, but for the bottom. Looks good, and we'll give it a padding of 1 rem. Maybe it looks like one on the left and right is good. Looks like one on the top is good, but it looks like I might need more on the bottom. So what I'm gonna do is 1 rem, and then I'll say 2 rem, and I'll say 1 rem, and so that is top, right, bottom, left, and that looks pretty good. And then we gotta style the anchor tag. Congrats. Where is she working? Yeah, thanks. I'll let her know you sent your congrats. She's cleaning some cottages, doing like changing over the bedding and yeah, doing some cleaning. It's an awesome local place. She gets to work in nature, and some people feel the rain, others just get wet. Yeah, totally. And the thing that I find with rain is that the more I just accept getting wet, the less annoying the rain gets. Just there's a way to yeah, the best way to enjoy the rain is to just not dislike it. I don't know if that makes sense. Let's footer. Embrace the getting soaked. So we want our color will be the blue. And we want text decoration none. And we want the font size to be 1.8 rem, so same, or no, I think 1.6, yeah, that's way too big. Yeah, totally. It's, yeah, I've been working a lot with just my relationship with money, trying to, because I mean, I worked a job where I made really good money, and then I've made almost no money for a long time just because of changing my lifestyle and doing different things. So trying to focus more on, of course, making sure that I have enough to sustain myself and pay the bills, but making sure that the priority is doing work that I enjoy doing. So that's actually what I was really drawn to the streaming here too, is teaching, because I'm really wanting to do more teaching of coding. So this has been a really good way to just practice teaching and just do my code in front of people and learn new stuff myself too, because it's I find the greatest way to learn is for sure to teach. It's a balance, like many things, for sure. Absolutely. So I think we'll go a little bit smaller, and that looks good. And it needs to have the same cursor pointer, can't type. And then we'll add our happening footer hover, and this will change the background. Gray text, I believe. No, gray S. There. And so technically, and now that bottom might be a bit too much, so let's see what it does look like with one. Yeah, it definitely needs more than one on the bottom, so let's do 0.5. There, that looks good. Now one thing though is that this anchor tag is here, but we can click this whole entire thing, so that would be something that we'd need to fix at some point. Let's see this here, I can click show more and it will show me more, whereas this part actually isn't in the anchor. So if we take a look at, and the anchor is just the term for the link. If we take a look at this, we've got oh, that's the tweet thread. No, wrong section. We've got our footer there, and then we've got our anchor, and so this is the only clickable spot. So it's kind of like misleading that if I click on here, I should be able to go somewhere, just like Twitter shows. So basically, a couple ways we can fix that. One would be to make this display flex and then have this grow to the full width, but then we'd actually want to move the padding around it. So maybe another easier way to do that, let's see here. This is one of those things too, like there are literally so many ways that we can solve this problem. So it's just a matter of which way we want to do it. One way that we could do it, I called this a footer because it is technically a footer, but I could make this the anchor, and then we just have our text in there. Anchor. And so obviously now it's not looking right. It's got this weird stuff, so we'd have to refix this. And the reason is because it displays in line. So an anchor by default displays in line. So instead of displaying in line, we actually wanted to display block. And so now it takes up the full width. And because we had the anchor inside of there, we were referencing it by happening footer and then the anchor. This now is the anchor, so we don't need that anymore. So there we go. So that fixes it. So now when we go into the inspector and we take a look at that, instead of seeing an anchor on the side, the whole thing is the anchor. So I can click anywhere in here. To solve that footer issue, because theoretically if that is a footer and if you want it to be semantically correct, there is nothing stopping me from just wrapping this in a footer still. It's just that now we're styling the anchor instead of styling the footer. So the footer is just an anchor at that point. It's just a marker. So that would be probably the way that I would handle this particular situation. And one thing we could do is actually move this to here so that that makes more sense instead of having it on the anchor. And then all we'd have to do is, instead of that, we'd add the A there, so we're referencing the anchor within happening footer. But we want the hover to be on... Hover could be on either, actually. You could put the anchor there, and that's going to work. So yeah, I think that is all we'll get to for today as far as coding. So we can just chat here for the last 10 minutes, and if there's any questions on anything that we've done, or web development in general, or life in general, feel free. Let's just chat. Is web dev a good career? I loved coding from the time I was like 12 years old. So I worked in factories and worked other jobs until I was about 24 when I finally got my first job doing web development. I'd been doing it as a hobby before. I worked for 10 years for municipal government and really enjoyed it. Loved the work. Like any jobs, there's pros and cons to it. It can be a stressful job because there's a lot to it. There's contracting is tricky. I would say, especially starting out, trying to get a job working on one website is probably the way that you'll advance the best and have the most chance for success. It's working on one website is really good, but building your own website, just playing with it is great. But I would say, in my opinion, I'm biased because I am a web developer and I love being a web developer, but I would say it's a good career. It gives me lots of freedom, flexibility. It does keep me on the computer a lot, so if that's not something that you are wanting, it might not be the best career. It is good as a side job too, because it can be done remotely, and if you find the right people to teams to work with, or people that need websites, there's lots of good work in it. Is JavaScript the most important thing to learn? I would say HTML and CSS. It really depends too. I guess that depends on what you're wanting to do. If you're wanting to get more into the front end stuff that we're doing here, HTML and CSS is the way to go. Then adding functionality is JavaScript. I will say you won't go wrong by learning JavaScript, especially with Node now. So Node is the back end that's written in JavaScript. So A lot of people are familiar with PHP. That's what WordPress is written in. There's also .NET, which is Microsoft's web framework, and now Node is kind of this new server language that allows us to write JavaScript on the front end and the back end. So people do hire people with HTML and CSS skills, just people with HTML CSS skills, but I'd say you'd probably need to be like pretty proficient in it to get that. Yeah, you're right. It's you need to have a little bit more. There are jobs in it, but it's certainly limiting. Because what I would say is that if you just have HTML, CSS skills, you still have more skills than a lot of the people who are building just WordPress websites or Squarespace websites or Wix websites who don't have any HTML, CSS skills. So you can with the modern tools, you can literally be a web developer somewhat without even knowing how to do any HTML or CSS. So having that HTML and CSS is a good starting point. It allows you, ultimately at the end of the day, that's what displays on the website. So having a really good fundamental of how that works really helps you with your JavaScript. But I would say, yeah, if you're wanting to do it from a career perspective, I would certainly go more towards learning JavaScript. Especially right now. React is really good. There's lots of good frameworks, obviously, like there's Vue, there's Angular. I find them a little bit more, I've played around with all of them, and React has been the one that I've really enjoyed probably the most. Angular in 2020. Yeah, I played with Angular a little bit, but yeah, I played with Angular and React at the same time. So when I left the city when I was working there, I used to be a Cold Fusion developer, so that was kind of my primary, and I used jQuery would have been what I used from a JavaScript perspective. But then I had to kind of relearn something when I left there, because Cold Fusion is really only used in the medical field and government. It's not a really common language. So I started learning Angular and React, and I think Angular may be structurally more sound, especially for like larger projects. And Facebook is written on React, so it does scale largely, and I find React much simpler and a really good community. There's a lot of support to be able to learn it. I actually saw my library offers free courses. One of them is day courses for learning Anaconda. My cousin introduced me to it, and Python. Yeah, like Python script is really big in game development. It's really big in more technical type stuff. So if you're really interested in coding, like if coding is your thing as opposed to web development, I would say go with something like Python or Anaconda. Like, it provides a lot more tools for different pieces and interacting with the computer a lot more than just the web. But there's a lot of work in web development. How fast can you realistically get a job as a front-end developer starting from zero? Well, boot camps are pretty good. I would say it really depends on how much time you're willing to put into creating a portfolio. At the end of the day, the portfolio is what sells you on that spot. So what I would recommend is build yourself a website and use don't use a ton of technologies, use ones that you're really, really good at, but make those specific website or properties stand out. So the type of job that you want to do some research, figure out what kind of work you want to do, and build that. The course that I'm working on right now, which is meant to take somebody from learning basic HTML all the way to being able to develop a full app, we start by building the front end, just HTML and CSS, and learning that process to develop a incident tracking, issue tracking piece of software. So It's kind of like a to-do app where you create your tasks, but it also has time tracking and ultimately invoicing. So my idea behind it is that it's a course that you can take that teaches you how to build a tool that becomes a portfolio piece for you, as well as a piece that you can use in your contracting business if contracting is the way that you're wanting to go. So how fast? I would say if you're really, really committed and you really want to just put in the time, you could probably get a job, an entry-level web development job within 3 months, I would say, no problem. Boot camps are really good. I'm probably going to be running a few workshops. What's your experience level right now, Blackbird? Where are you kind of at with web development? Have you done much at all? How laggy is my video? I'm trying to adjust the audio to see if it will show up. But for me, it shows up really, really laggy. It might show up laggy for you guys. My next setup, I'm hoping to have a little bit more fast computer and be able to stream a little bit better. Not bad at all? Cool. That's good. For me, it's like I talk and then I see it 5 or 6 seconds later, my mouth moving, so it's a little strange. Not much, yeah. Yeah, I would say for sure YouTube videos, stuff like this particular Twitter project too. If this is something, go ahead and look at the Git repo and check out that code and build something like this. So taking a project like this, like Twitter or something, is a really good portfolio piece because it's already been built. So you don't have to worry about the design. I don't know where you're at from a design perspective. If you have good design skills, then design something and mock it up. But if design is not kind of where you want to go if the coding is the direction that you want to go, definitely just pick something like recreate Facebook, recreate Twitch even, and just get started. I would recommend VS Code as an editor to start out. It's really good. It has a lot of extensions and works really well. But I would start with HTML, CSS, get pretty proficient with that, then learn Sass, and then get into JavaScript. And you can learn JavaScript at the same time because it's all connected. But there's a couple of, I don't know if you're familiar, Blackbird, that people who already have courses out, just learn, yeah, exactly. There's, if you look up Developer Ed, I think, on YouTube, Traversy Media is really good. And listen to the Syntax FM podcast. They're really good JavaScript. So they talk about all the most modern stuff with JavaScript, and they've got a twice weekly podcast, and I've learned a ton from them. They're really good to learn what's modern and what's new. And they've got some pieces in there too about how to learn web dev. So check out those things first and keep coming back here and asking questions, because all those were really great questions. And I will be creating more content like this too, and I'll have some courses myself, and I'm going to be running a workshop in probably, I'm hoping, in August. So if that's something that's interested in you, just stick around and that'll be available. Tim, I know nothing still. It's just been fun to absorb the information. Yeah, well, that's where it starts too, right? Just start absorbing the information and then just start playing. That's the thing, is there's so much information, so it can become overload where you're just learning and there's so much to learn. Don't even begin to think that you're going to learn everything. The basics are all you need to get a job in web development, especially an entry one. Plant those seeds, exactly. Just get really good fundamentals at the basics, because even React, which is a super advanced framework, at the end of the day still compiles down to basic JavaScript. At the end of the day, Sass still compiles down to basic CSS. So the more that you understand about how the basics work, the the better you will do overall. You're in no rush. Cool. Well, it's been really great chatting with everybody here today, and thanks for the questions, and thanks for hanging out. I have to get the van set up for Crystal to make her way to work. But Blackbird, thank you. Dawn, if you're still in there, thanks for stopping by, and Feet First as well, thanks for your presence here, and Tim, as always, it's been great, and everybody else who's in there. Chat, thank you for coming by. I'm just going to take a look and see if there's anybody that we can raid. It looks like there's Grog Dev. He's this pixel artist game developer that I've been checking out once in a while, and he's been pretty cool to connect with. Is that something that you guys would be interested in raiding by? I'm gonna do it. We'll send over to Grogdev. I think he's got some really cool pixel art avatars. He's been doing some great stuff with that. So thanks again for everybody stopping by. I look forward to see you. Thanks for the follow, Blackbird. I appreciate that. I really do. We will see you guys next week.